and welcome to Atomic Lizards. We're a trio of friends podcasting about the Godzilla franchise and other films we love. I'm Miranda, the film fanatic.
I'm Udi, the de facto film expert.
And I'm Dan, the kaiju extraordinaire.
It's time for the Atomic Lizards 2 Halloween 2 Spooktacular episode. Today we are covering Train to Busan, Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, and Stay Alive for the Halloween season. This episode will have spoilers, so go watch them if you haven't. Now let's get started. First up is Train to Busan. I picked this movie for a Halloween special. I struggled a bit on which film to pick this year, but felt zombies were a good fit for the season. Plus, Dan and Udi hadn't seen this film. Train to Busan is a 2016 Korean film directed by Yoon Sang-ho. The film is about a zombie virus that pushes Korea into a state of emergency. The viewer follows a group of people trapped on an express train to Busan as they fight their way for survival. So, what did you guys think of this film? Is it what you were expecting?
Yeah, I'm glad that I finally got around to watching this because Train to Busan, I had heard about it and I heard that it was really good. It was like this, Korean zombie movie. And it had been on my watch list for the longest time, but I just never got around to watching it. And finally have gotten around to watching it. And I gotta say, it lived up to the hype. Train to Busan was really good. It was very well written. It was a interesting setup for a zombie movie, because most zombie apocalypse movies usually take place on a worldwide scale. I mean, the George Romero of the Living Dead movies, usually they're in one spot, the Night of the Living Dead was in one spot, and then Dawn of the Dead was in a mall. But traditionally, when I think of zombie apocalypse movies, it's usually this huge worldwide thing for the setting. You got people spanning across the country or across a big city and whatnot. But this movie takes place mainly entirely on a train, which once again, I think that's hence the name Train to Busan. But I thought that was a very interesting setup for a zombie apocalypse movie, and it worked because I gotta tell you, a train probably has to be one of the worst places for you to be in for a zombie apocalypse. And especially when there's
definitely.
zombies. Yeah. Especially when there are zombies on that train. And these aren't traditional Night of the Living Dead zombies or Walking Dead zombies. These are running zombies. So, not good.
Yeah, they're pretty fast.
They are, yeah.
And the virus is very fast acting, too.
That, too.
It's instant.
It is I think I had mentioned this when we were watching it because we watched all these movies together. We got together as a group and we watched them all together. And I think I had mentioned this while we were watching it, but it kind of reminded me of the Brad Pitt movie World War Z, which I know is based off a book, and apparently the movie's nothing like the book, but that's besides the point. It reminded me of that movie, which is how fast the virus changes you. So that also added an extra layer of stakes to the story because it's once you get bitten, it's instant. Although there were a few times in the movie where it felt like it did take a little bit of time, more so than usual, but I'm just going to chalk that up to, movie time or whatever. But yeah, I really enjoyed Train to Busan. It is a very good zombie movie. Bring some tissues because it is very sad. This is not a happy movie.
No, it is not. It makes me cry every single time. It's so heartbreaking.
It really is.
At some points, it feels more like a drama than a science fiction zombie movie.
Oh, I'd agree.
Yeah. The characters are really well done as well.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone serves a purpose in the plot.
Definitely, the strongest part of this movie are its characters and writing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I thought Train to Busan was really good.
Yeah, I knew about it since the year it came out, and I've been meaning to watch it ever since, but I just haven't prioritized doing that, I guess. And I've also owned it for years because I got it from FYE, but I just never watched it. However, especially at some point in college, I don't know why I started getting more recommendations for it again. And then there's this one classmate in particular that like broke down the movie a little bit and was like, "Oh yeah, it's so good, it's so good." And I was like, I mean, I've gotten it recommended to me so many times at this point. I'm like, I'm kind of scared it's not going to live up to the hype. So I mean, I'm still going to watch it sometime, but I don't know. And then yeah, it still took a few more years after that, but finally watched it this time and it held up. I was shocked. I was really, really not thinking it was going to, but thankfully it did. And I mean, pretty much what you guys are saying. I mean, not only is it a really fun and well done horror movie, well, zombie movie, I guess horror movie depending, and it's horror movie-ish. It's zombies, but yeah, like a really, really good zombie movie. But like, it's also like Miranda said, it's also a really good drama, and the characters are really fun. I feel like, I mean, in all movies really, but especially like in a zombie movie, like the cast of human characters you get surviving the apocalypse can really dictate the vibe of the movie. And so I think they did a really good job of picking an interesting group of humans to follow throughout the film. I was particularly a big fan of the guy who plays Gilgamesh in the Eternals, because of course I got my one Marvel reference already. There we go. And then you also got the guy who plays, the guy who plays, I don't remember his actual name, but the rich family name is Kevin in Parasite. So I was like, oh, hey, it's that guy. I had only ever seen him in Parasite, so that was kind of fun.
Just want to say, I'll give you that one Marvel reference because that's the only other movie I recognize him from. So
yes,
But-
I'm not alone.
Yes, me too.
that dude was badass though. So yes,
very
he was
cool.
definitely one of the best characters in the movie.
Yeah. I just love that he was just literally straight up beating up zombies with his bare hands.
I mean,
For,
that's
like,
what
the
you gotta
longest
do.
time.
They're on a train. What else are you gonna do
Could use
other
a
than punch
suitcase.
zombies?
No one had any guns, so that's all.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
That's all you really got at that point.
that's true. But I mean, I don't know. Like, it just made him even cooler that he was just like literally grabbing zombies, like, "Hey, what are you doing?" Bap! Just punching him straight in the face. I don't know. But yeah, and I think, like Dan was saying, I mean, it was an interesting setting to put a zombie apocalypse on, like a train, like a moving location. That's always kind of interesting, and I just think they did a really good job with the pacing of the film. Like the intro didn't take too long, then all of a sudden, boom, there's zombies, and then you're like building up tension, trying to like do this or that. Yeah, I really liked it. It was pretty much what I was expecting, given what I had heard over the years. Although thankfully I remained spoiler free this whole time. I mean, as spoiler free as you can get with like a movie like this. But yeah, I really liked it. The emotional moments really worked for me as well. I had heard it was sad. I didn't really believe it was going to be sad. And then we got to the end and I was like, oh my God, okay, well, wow. Although I will say, like, and I mean, this could go for any movie, I guess, but if it hadn't been for the performances, like the child performance and the performance of the dad in the movie, I don't think, like it would have been sad, but not like as sad. But the child's performance at the end of this is like just crazy. Like it feels real, which I just feel like really makes it super freaking sad. So like they did a really good job.
It's really intense. The young actress's performance. I don't know her name, unfortunately. Should have looked that up. But her performance is very, very, very good. Like, even though I've seen this movie like about 4 times now, it gets me every time because it just feels so real and like intense. It feels really intense, her performance, and it's just so good. It's so intense, and like you said, it feels very real. It's kind of scary how like real it feels because like this is an intense situation, and like she captures like the feelings of what I assumed the daughter was going through in like the time frame we spend with her. And then her singing while crying at the end, I think is Aloha. Oh, Aloha, eh? I think might be the title of the song. But I don't know what it is about that song, but it just makes me like get a little emotional. Whether you sing it in English or Hawaiian or Korean, it's just a very intense like song, and it brings tears to my eyes every time. So she did a fantastic job. I mean, everyone did a fantastic job, but like she really holds I think the ending together. Like, without that performance, it would be kind of not as impactful, I guess.
Oh yeah, totally agree. And just so we have it on the record, I believe the child actor's name is Kim Soo-an, and the guy who played Gilgamesh in the Eternals, just so that we don't keep calling him Gilgamesh from the Eternals, his name is Ma Dong-seok. My apologies, but it's something like that. But yeah, I totally agree with what you said, though. Like, just her performance elevated the film for sure. But also, like, the singing part at the end, it's like you already thought you got to the worst of, like, not the worst as in bad, but just like the height of the emotionality, and then they're like walking through the tunnel, and you're like, oh no, are they actually gonna kill him? Are they gonna pull a Night of the Living Dead here? And then all of a sudden she starts singing as she's crying, and you're like, oh god, please no. Bringing me right back to tears just when I thought it was over.
Okay, I need my box of tissues here. Like, I can't function right now. Just don't look at me. I'm bawling my eyes out.
Turn the lights off.
Like, when I first watched this movie, based on a recommendation from a classmate, and I thought it was going to be scary. I thought it was going to be, like, intense, like, horror movie, but no, it's, like, full-on drama. Just, like, it's so well made that, like I said, each character holds a specific, like, part of the story for specific reasons, and I can tell there's, like, social commentary in it too. And well, I don't really know anything about Korea and all the stuff going on with, like, how other society functions and stuff, so I can't really pick up on any specific things, but, like, I can see and I can read that there's, like, social commentary on their situation in this movie, which I think is really good for a movie like this because it is a foreign film. So if you can make a film where, like, a non-native person can watch your movie and still pick up on those cues, like, means you're doing something really good and, like, clever, because that stuff's important to, like, zombie movies in general. Dating all the way back to the Night of the Living Dead, zombie movies, the fall of society, how it's affecting it, who's being affected, and, like, all of that, like, deconstruction of society is, like, something in zombie movies that are just, it's so interesting to look at. It even, like, shows up in John Carpenter's The Thing, which isn't really a zombie movie. It's not a zombie movie, but it still has that, like, deconstruction of society. And for them to, like, take that idea, put it on a train, so you're, like, literally, it's like a capsule, and you just know it's gonna just explode, and there's gonna be chaos. And it's done really well. And also, this is my first favorite movie that takes place on a train. I haven't watched Snowpiercer, but I know that one takes place on a train too. But it's just a really good movie, and I'm glad that you both enjoyed watching it. It's just really fun to share movies that I like with you guys and to have you guys also like them. So that's really cool.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's always nice to like watch a movie that you really like, but it's also really nice when you share it with friends and they end up really liking it too. So yeah, that was a great pick, Miranda. So thank you for choosing that. I know you had a couple of other really good options as well. I won't say what those are in case either you want to say or you want to hold off in case we use them later. But yeah, this is definitely a really solid pick, and I'm glad you did it because otherwise I don't know when I would have watched it. I think my plan was to try to watch it this year for spooky season, but I don't know if that would have actually happened or not. So thank you for letting me watch this finally because I don't think I was going to get to it. Maybe, I don't know.
I agree. I also don't know when I ever would have watched it if we didn't watch it for this. So I'm glad you picked it as well.
A really good movie. Like, every time I watch it, I just pick up on new things, new details, and, like, it's such an intense story that the way that it was filmed, and they used, like, they built, like, a train car so they could do the panning shots. Like, they were in an actual train at some point, I think. Like, the performers for the zombies, I don't know if they're, like, do acrobats or are, like, double jointed, or, like, if they do circus Olay or, like, whatever. they're like really good at moving their bodies. If they're dancers or break dancers, like that control over their body to be like, hey, I'm a zombie and this is kind of scary. Like not like shuffling along like Walking Dead zombies, but like actual like it kind of goes into that like body horror side of the things, which I don't particularly like. But it's done so well that it's like believable that these people are zombies. And then the makeup on top of it, really, really good. There's so many fantastic elements in this movie.
Yeah, special shout out to the performers who were the zombies, because just like Miranda was saying, the way they moved their bodies was like just it looked very like it's just like, how do you get your body to like move like that? Like I feel like if I tried to do that, I wouldn't be able to. So yeah, special shout out to the zombie.
I'd break something.
Exactly. Yeah. So special shout out to the zombie performers.
Big agree. I can't imagine how athletic you'd have to be a zombie on that production, because my goodness, they were twisting and turning and standing upright from being like laid down on the ground in 2 seconds. Like, good grief, that was a lot, but it looked very, very cool.
So cool. And like comparing it to the Night of the Living Dead to this more modern day, it's so interesting to see the evolution of like what the subgenre kind of started out of to modern day, and like how they've evolved and became different. You still have like the fact that they're like undead and stuff, but like I don't know, it's very fascinating. I would love to learn more about the zombie genre in general, because I'm sure there's like fantastic stuff out there. Like I enjoy Zombieland, but like I haven't really looked at other classic or like not mainstream, like the highly recommended zombie films. So I really only have those three to like base all my zombie knowledge off, and I would love to learn more because it fascinates me.
Just out of curiosity, have you ever watched the sequel to this one, Peninsula?
No, I didn't know there was a sequel. Well, that's cool.
Yeah, there's a Train to Busan sequel?
Yeah, it didn't get nearly as good of reviews, though. That's probably why you don't know about it.
Oh,
okay.
Well, I'll have to add it to the list, though.
Yeah, I didn't even know there was a sequel. Interesting.
Pretty sure it was directed by the same guy. Well, not only did it not receive as good reviews, unfortunately, but also came out in 2020, so that also might have not helped.
Does it have the same characters? Well, I guess. Well,
I'm guessing probably not.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I guess maybe not, but I mean, there are still some surviving characters at the end. The daughter.
Just from what I can tell
wife.
from a brief like scrolling, no.
Okay, so it's like different characters then. Interesting.
Interesting.
What's that one about then? Like, because obviously Train to Busan is about
zombies.
Yeah, I mean, because this was about zombies.
It's about a nice cafe dinner.
Well, because this one was about like trying to get to Busan while on a train full of zombies. So what's the sequel about?
Surviving the zombies?
I guess.
Well, yeah, of course.
Everyday society? Maybe it's like iZombie.
iZombie.
You eat your brain. They eat the brains and solve murders.
There we go.
I'm guessing it's probably not that, though.
The zombies become sentient.
I don't know, but I just want Rahul Kohli to be in another zombie project. We love you, Rahul. But anyway, Peninsula, here's a description on Letterboxd. It says, escape the apocalypse. A soldier and his team battle hordes of post-apocalyptic zombies in the wastelands of the Korean Peninsula. Makes sense.
Gotcha. Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, maybe I'll check that out one day as well, because I'm just kind of curious now.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, we'll probably all check it out in like 15 years.
Yeah, it'd be like 5 to 7 business years.
5 to 7 business years, exactly.
It's interesting that there's a sequel, because I didn't know that. So maybe one day we'll cover it, but time will tell. But do you guys have any other thoughts on Train to Busan?
The business guy sucked.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Yeah, the businessman.
The COO.
Screw that guy, yeah.
Sucky person. Not good.
Like, I was hoping his death was going to be a little more satisfying. It wasn't as satisfying as I was hoping for, but, I mean, at least he got what was coming to him.
Yeah. He did kill a lot of people. His storyline kind of juxtaposes the father's story because they're both like these like businessmen who have like some sort of power or like resources. Whereas like by the end of the film, the father is saving people and like helping people, and the COO just is like, whatever, I'm here for myself and only myself, and you can all die because I don't care about you guys. So it was nice that he got he got bit by a zombie and then got pushed off a train. So that's a pretty like intense death, I would say. But like I was saying, all the characters play a part in the plot. And I do like the fact that they like added some younger people in there with the baseball team and the girl who is that like joins the baseball team. So you could see like, okay, here's how like a younger group would fight the zombies. Here's how a husband and a pregnant wife would do in the situation, or two older sisters in the situation, a father and his daughter. So it gives you like a wide variety of characters to like observe and like see how they interact with the zombies and the collapse of society.
Yeah, I agree. And I will say that even though I didn't find the businessman's death to be that satisfying, I did find that one scene where like the main characters like make it to the part of the train where everyone's safe, and the businessman like kind of makes everyone believe that, or he doesn't make them believe that they're bitten, but he like convinces everyone to like not let them in because it's like, oh well, they could be bitten and whatnot, and then everyone just goes along with it. It was kind of satisfying to like, because they ended up like locking the main characters away in that other part of the train. It was kind of satisfying to see them all get like killed by the zombies, because that one sister like opens the door and releases all the zombies in there. Like that was a little satisfying, because it just made me think of that one meme from the Joker movie where it's like, get what you effing deserve, and it's like, yeah, that's what's happening to these people right now, because screw those people.
But like that's a main thing, I think, in fiction like this, in zombie movies. I can think of the episode of Doctor Who called Midnight, where they're all stuck on this confined space and there's like alien nonsense going on, and then like they all start to like get annoyed with each other, don't know whether or not to stand up for the right thing or be like complacent in the situation. That like happens in John Carpenter's The Thing as well. And it's just like a really interesting concept to play with, which I feel like I've said a lot in this little short period of time, but it's just so good. And the fact that they were like, yes, let's do this makes total sense for the story.
Yeah. And I also thought real quick that it was like kind of interesting how the businessman, as he was turning into the zombie, he like had all of his faculties at first, because like his eye, because one telltale sign that you're gonna turn is your eye is like everyone's eyes get like this, they get coated over. Yeah, they like, I don't even know how to describe it, but their eyes turn white pretty much.
Yeah, like a frost.
Yeah. And like the businessman, like that's how his eyes were. They were like turning white, and he like, but he still like had all of his faculties for a bit. And I thought that was a little interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
Lord Business sucked, and he was a kind of fun final boss.
Yeah.
Final boss, yeah. The Train to Busan video game adaptation. Businessman is the final boss.
That could be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it would be kind of interesting. I'm sure it would be just like a lot of other zombie games, but I mean, I'm a sucker for a good zombie game, so I probably wouldn't care.
If it's one of those choose your character games where it's like a co-op game, I call Gilgamesh. You guys pick someone else.
Dang. He'd be the coolest.
He's the best character.
His melee power would probably be like super
Dude,
high.
He would definitely be the tank.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But anyway, I think, like I said before, they just had a really interesting group of human characters in this film, and they had like you said, Miranda, they had an interesting selection of like different age groups and different like people in different stages of life and like different careers in life and stuff like that. So that made it really interesting, and like it was fun to have like a baseball team on the train. So it's like not only is it just like the young people, but it's like a baseball team. Like, what better sport to be in a zombie apocalypse than like a baseball team where you have all your baseball bats and everything? Like, if they were a soccer team, they'd probably be screwed.
Really good at running.
Well, yeah, I guess if they'd probably be good at running, but outside of that, they wouldn't have like any weapons or anything. I guess like if they had like a golf team, that might have been good too.
I think a baseball bat would probably do more damage to a zombie than a golf club, but both suck when you get hit with them or you accidentally hit someone with them. Just be cautious around them. Not fun experience.
Should we be worried?
No, I just, as a child, got hit with a baseball bat, and for about half a week, I tried to be a golfer in middle school. Did not stick.
Yeah, that'll do it.
That was our conversation about Train to Busan. I know it was kind of short, but hopefully us talking about it will recommend it to you, the listener. And if you watch it, I hope you enjoy it. But let's go into ratings. Dan, what would you give this movie out of 5?
Yeah, this is an easy 4. This was a really good movie, really good writing, strong characters, some good zombie action, some very tense moments, high stakes. Solid 4.
And Udi, what would you give it?
I'm gonna go with a 4.5 out of 5. I really liked it, and I think I still live up to the hype after all this time. Shockingly, I mean, as long as you don't go with like crazy high expectations, I think I expected it to be good, but like I wasn't expecting like a masterpiece. Which, I mean, I wouldn't say it's like a masterpiece of a film, but it's also like as good as you could ask for it to be. I feel like I don't know, like I don't know what that 0.5 is that's missing for me is, but I mean, I just really liked it, and I think it was really well done. So yeah, 4.5.
I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5 because it's just a fun watch. I mean, I say fun. It's kind of heartbreaking and sad, but it's also got really good drama. The acting is fantastic. The story is really interesting. So that's why it's getting a 5 from me, which means the Atomic Lizard's average score for Train to Busan is a 4.5. On to the next film.
All right, next up is my pick, Tucker and Dale versus Evil. This film is about two hillbillies who are suspected of being killers by a group of paranoid college kids camping near the duo's cabin. As the body count climbs, so does the fear and confusion as the college kids try to seek revenge. This film was released in 2010 and was directed by Eli Craig. So, what did you guys think of Tucker and Dale versus Evil?
I mean, to be fair, I have watched this film before a few times, so I knew what to expect going in, but man, what a fun film. I remember I kind of stumbled upon this by accident. It was on Netflix a while back. I don't know if it still is, but I watched it probably sometime like 2018 or 2019 for the first time. And yeah, I mean, I didn't know anything about it. I had never heard of it before. I was just like, what is this? So I put it on one day just randomly, and I was not ready for what it was. And I'm just grateful that I still enjoyed it, because I don't remember if it was in 2018 or 2019 when I watched it, but it was definitely when I was like younger and didn't appreciate good kind of cheesy movies as much. Like some, yeah, but not all of them, and definitely not as much as I do now. But thankfully, this one just straight up broke through the cracks no matter what, and I have enjoyed it ever, like since my first viewing. But yeah, like I think I mainly watched it just because I knew that Alan Tudyk was in it, so I was like, oh, Alan Tudyk's in this. Okay, sure, why not? I'll check it out. And yeah, I was just laughing and having a good time. And I mean, yeah, it's just a really, really good time. If you're ever just trying to put on something that's like spooky-ish, not in the sense that it's scary, but just like spooky season coded, I guess. But you're like, you just want to have like a fun, chill movie for like an hour and a half, definitely watch this, because this is just a blast. What about you guys? I know, Dan, you'd watched this before, but Miranda, you had never watched this, right?
I had not watched this movie before our Halloween movie day. This movie is not what I was expecting. I believe you both said it was like a comedy, but in like the horror genre. I do like a good horror comedy movie. They're quite enjoyable usually. But this was not what I was expecting at all. I thought it would be dumber and a bit stupider. But it actually is really interesting. It has an interesting plot. Like, I was not expecting it to have like a real story or substance to it, because I thought it was like one of those dumb parody movies, like Scary Movie or like The Starving Games. Now, I haven't watched those, so maybe they're interesting. I have no idea. But they're just not something I like lean towards. So watching this was a super fun time, and I actually really enjoyed it.
I just want to say real quickly, while I do enjoy like the first couple of scary movies, but those like parody movies, like disaster movies, Starving Games, all that, those are not great movies, so would not recommend.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Yeah, so just figured
They
I'd
don't
let you know.
seem good.
Yeah, no.
They're on my not watch list. Yeah, I think the performances in this movie were really good too, and the kills are shocking. Like, I wasn't expecting anything, but the moment the kid who jumped into a wood chipper, I was like, oh my gosh, what is going on? This is absolutely ridiculous. And it has an interesting plot between Tucker and Dale and the college girl that they save from drowning. And just to see like the paranoia of like the college kids and like the other kills throughout, like it's done pretty well. It was pretty fun. Don't watch the trailer though. The trailer will spoil everything, so if you have not watched this movie, just go in blind as possible, because the trailer will ruin like most of the funny bits in this movie.
I have to agree with Miranda there. Like, if you have seen this movie and you're planning on like showing it to your friends, it is best to just show it to them blind. Just don't tell them anything about it. But yeah, Tucker and Dale versus Evil. So I first watched this movie a couple years ago. I was hanging out with my friends, my college friends, and they decided to put this on. I had never heard of this movie before. So I was like, all right, I'll check it out. And yeah, man, this movie is a very fun time. Like, it takes the whole like killer hillbilly trope and just turns it on his ear, because it's all just a bunch of unfortunate coincidences that cause these like college kids to think that they're being entrapped by these killer hillbillies, when really they're not. It's just two guys who are trying to go on vacation, build their dream vacation house, and they unfortunately just get wrapped up in all of this nonsense. And yeah, I just love the kind of ironic situations that happen. One scene in particular that I'm thinking of is there's a scene where Tucker is chainsawing this log to get some work done, and he doesn't see that there's like a bee's nest in there, so he accidentally chainsaws into the bee's nest, and that causes the bees to like start stinging him. So he's like running around with the chainsaw still going on, because you know he's so surprised by the bees that he hasn't turned it off. But there's one of the college kids starts like running from him in terror, because they like think that he's running after them with the chainsaw trying to kill them, but in reality he's just running around with the chainsaw because he's being stung by bees. So you know, it's like little stuff like that that's just really funny. And like there's a scene where like, because what starts like the whole movie off is, you know, as we've said, there's like college kids like vacationing in the same area as them, so like they all try to do some night swimming at the same time that Tucker and Dale are fishing. So like they startle one of the girls, and it causes her to like hit her head and get knocked out, so they like rescue her. So then they go to their friends and be like, hey, we got your friend or whatever, but obviously they're trying to say that they have her, you know, because they saved her from drowning, but like they don't know that. So it's just like little stuff like that that's really funny. I love the dynamic between like Tucker and Dale. They both Alan Tudyk and Tyler Labine give great performances as their respective characters. It's just, you know, it's a lot of fun. Like, this isn't going to be a movie that you go into expecting like really good writing or anything like that, but it's just a fun movie. It's good for a laugh. It's good to watch with friends. It's good for if you want to watch something around spooky season that's not too spooky, but like you guys were saying, still carries the essence of the spooky season. It's a good time if you want something to laugh at around spooky season. I highly recommend Tucker and Dale versus Evil. It's a really good time. So that being said, did you guys like have any like favorite parts or favorite jokes from the movie? I'll start us off because Miranda mentioned the wood chipper scene. That is probably my favorite part That scene gets me every single time. Just 'cause you're just not expecting it. He just jumps into the wood chipper, and then like Alan Tudyk is just like freaking out. He's like, "Oh my god, like what's going on?" You know, like I love that scene. It's hilarious.
I mean, how could you not freak out during that? You're just throwing logs and
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong.
then. But yeah, that's probably my favorite as well. But I also really like the part that's kind of after that where like he tried to get the kid out, he couldn't, so, like the legs are stuck, and then he goes into the house to get Dale, and then there he's like, "Hey, like I need your help." So then they go outside to help, and then he's like, "Oh, why don't we just call the cops?" And he's like, "Dale, if we call the cops, what are we supposed to say? Who are they gonna believe? Like, oh, all these." He's like, "Oh, officer, we had a doozy of a day. You know, all these college kids started killing themselves all over my property." And then, like a couple of moments later, the sheriff literally pulls up to the house, and so they're like, "Oh God!" And they're literally holding the legs of the teenager, like the college kid who like jumped into the wood chipper. So then the officer gets out, and they're holding the legs of like this half destroyed torso, and then Dale or Tucker just goes, "Well, officer, we've had a doozy of a day."
Yeah, that's a good scene. Yeah.
I really like that part.
I also love the part where Tucker is like, "I know what's going on here. We're part of this is like some suicide cult."
Yeah, like some pack suicide.
Yeah, like a suicide pact or whatever. That was pretty good as well.
I think I basically watched this movie as like surprised Pikachu meme like the whole time, just like in shock of what was going on. Not like shock like bad, but like like surprised the whole time. But I liked the part where Dale offers the young college girl breakfast. And he's like, she screams. He's like, "Oh, you don't like pancakes? That's fine. I can make you something else." And I was like, that like sets the tone of what the movie is gonna be really, really well. Be like, yeah, whatever you were expecting, it's the opposite.
I agree.
And like the kills are actually pretty gruesome in this. Surprisingly, I guess. Like they definitely played really well with like the horror tropes. But other than like, well, I do like the kind of end where the college girl, I don't remember her character name, but sits down at the like kitchen table and Dale's on one side, and then it has the evil college student, I don't know, the guy in blue, and they like sit down to like
Chad.
Yeah, Chad. Of course his name is Chad. I think I said that when we watched it too. But yeah.
Yeah.
They like sit down at the table and like do a quote unquote therapy like session because she wants to be a therapist. And then Chad just goes into this like gruesome backstory of like how his parents were kidnapped and murdered and all this stuff. And I was like, wow, that was a twist that I was not expecting for this movie, but interesting. So it has like good moments, and like I said earlier, it's an interesting story.
Yeah, and I also want to add, because you're right, Miranda, like the kills in this movie can be pretty gruesome at times, like especially like the wood chipper scene. Even though that scene is hilarious in hindsight, the kill is very gruesome because there's like, blood going everywhere. And whatnot.
Blood everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It's a wood chipper, but
yeah.
One thing I do like that this film does is I love how it'll take like pretty gruesome moments like that, but it'll still have fun with it. Like there's a moment where Tucker is kidnapped by the college kids, and they're like trying to like I guess torture him to get information out of him about like Dale and whatnot. And like they cut his fingers off, and like after they do it, you just hear like Tucker go, "You prick!" Like at the end. So like, and then like when they show the fingers to like Dale, he's like, "Oh no, they cut off his bullet fingers," So I like how they still have fun with like really gruesome moments like that because it helps take a little bit of the edge off.
I back into the ending because Dale and the college girl end up going bowling. So clearly they're in like a league or something. So it's not just a throwaway joke.
I had never really thought about that, but that's a good point, Miranda. But I also like after that where like he's still hanging upside down because the college kids left him, and then Dale goes to like try to rescue him, and then he just like goes, finds him, and then he like cuts the rope, and then he's like, wait, and then he just like falls straight to the ground, and you just hear go like, ooh, and he's like, this is the worst vacation ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, not a good vacation. 0 stars. Would not recommend.
They also burned down his vacation home.
Oh, they did.
They
yeah.
did do that.
But I do like the line as well where, like, I think it's the scene that you're talking about, Miranda, where it's like they're in the therapy session, and then he like tells his whole backstory. Maybe it's after that, but they're like, "Oh my god, you're actually half hillbilly," to Chad. That part was funny.
Oh yeah, because he's like freaking out too. He's like, "No, I'm not one of them," or whatever.
Yeah. Definitely like a fun play on like old like slasher type movies like that, or like Cabin in the Wood type movies.
Yeah. Speaking of Cabin in the Woods, that's another like fun little parody horror movie, but that's for another time.
Interesting to see Alan Tudyk in a role that isn't in Knight's Tale, or him. I believe he voices Hey Hey and Moana. So it's like, oh yeah, this guy probably does other things other than Knight's Tale. But I don't really know much about him, so it's interesting to see him in a different role. And I think the college kids, like the people they casted for that, really like encapsulated the 2010s vibe, I guess. And I think a lot of that also comes from the costuming, because like it just screams 2010. Like the polo shirts, the shorts, the wide like the wider pants, not skinny jeans. Like it just encapsulates that time period really well.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned Alan Tudyk because like he was the reason I watched this movie. But to be honest, the first thing I ever remember seeing Alan Tudyk in was Transformers 3: Dark of the Moon. He played this really zany and wild character in that movie. He was like the personal assistant to John Turturro's character, and that was the first thing I knew him as for like the longest time.
That's interesting. While we're discussing like where we know like Alan Tudyk from, funnily enough, I'm starting to realize Alan Tudyk has been in a lot of DC projects, because that's where I recognize him from. Because I think recognize him from, so there's this very obscure, unknown comedy series called I think it's called Powerless, and it was DC's attempt at doing like kind of like an Office sitcom set in the DC universe, but it was like just following just like regular everyday working people that didn't have, they weren't superheroes, and it was just about them like working at a bad like insurance company while also living in the DC universe. And he is in that show. He like plays like the boss character or whatever. So I first recognized him from that. And then he's in another DC project, Doom Patrol, based off of like very obscure comic, but the show's actually really good. It's really freaking weird, but it's a pretty good show. So I recognize him from that. And now he's going to star in the Superman movie by James Gunn. So maybe Alan Tudyk's secretly a DC fan. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. His Superman role is supposedly like a secret role, so it probably won't be like very big, but I'm very intrigued to see who it'll be. And then I don't remember if you mentioned it, but he's also in Creature Commandos, the new animated.
Oh yeah, he is. It's telling you, man, he's in like a bunch of DC projects for some reason.
He said, "Screw Marvel, I'm only in for DC."
Yeah. Has he ever been in a Marvel project? I don't think so.
As far as I know, I don't think so. But he has been in Star Wars because he played K2SO in Rogue One.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, that's like the extent of my Alan Tudyk knowledge. Maybe there's like one other thing, but like the main 3 things I know him from are Transformers 3, this, and Rogue One. Yeah, those are like my main 3. But he also had a little, I guess he wasn't technically kind of Marvel. He had a little cameo role in Deadpool 2 when Cable appears from the future. He stumbles across this pickup truck with these 2 rednecks sitting on the back, like in the trunk space, and and then the 2 people that are playing the rednecks are Matt Damon with lots of prosthetics and speaking in like a southern accent, like a country accent, so that you can't really tell that it's him, and then it's Alan Tudyk. So yeah, I guess that's the other thing I kind of know him from.
So wait, it's not a connection to Tucker and Dale versus Evil? It's not the same person?
Potentially, but hopefully not, because they think he gets killed by Cable, so maybe it's
another.
I've
never seen Deadpool 2, so...
or maybe it's an alternate version of Tucker,
Yeah, maybe everything's connected to DC and Marvel. We gotta get those references
The
into those two
multiverse.
franchises. It wouldn't be the Atomic Lizard podcast if we didn't talk about those.
Well, I'm kind
True.
of going down a rabbit hole now because I went to look up the power list because seriously, like I'm pretty sure like I'm one of like 2 people on the planet who remembers that show. It had Danny Pudi in it, Abed from Community.
Interesting.
Yeah. I remember like hearing about that show existing, but I didn't know that it ever like aired, or I never like saw it anywhere. So I was like waiting for it to come out, and then also I was like, oh wait, it's been canceled and it's disappeared. What happened? Or like, yeah, I don't know. But Danny Pudi was in it. I could be wrong. It could be a different show. Was Vanessa Hudgens in it?
Yes, she was.
Okay. Hey, okay, cool. Yeah, I think that sucked that show didn't work out because I feel like that show had a lot of potential, and then they just kind of canned it, and it was like, ah, okay.
Yeah, I liked the idea of it, like it taking place in the DC universe, but just following like just regular everyday characters and like trying to make a comedy out of it. Like I like the idea, but yeah, just the execution wasn't there. But this isn't about Powerless. This is about Halloween movies. So, did we have anything else to say regarding Tucker and Dale versus Evil?
Another thing I noticed was the color grading on this movie. It feels very sepia toned, kind of in the same way that Twilight feels so like blue and teal. Like this movie also has shots where it's just very like orange and like yellow saturated. But then there's also some really cool shots of like them in the forest with the light shining through the forest and like smoke, and like I was like, wow, this is actually kind of really interesting cinematic like framing for this movie. And like some shots do feel like they were like a B-list or like a BC movie, which I think kind of like fits with the vibe of what they were going to. And from my understanding, based off what you guys said, it had a lower budget, so that makes sense. But like, it doesn't detract from the movie. There's actually some really cool stuff going on in it that I was just like, oh, that's pleasantly surprising. I wasn't expecting that, and like all of that working together really actually makes the movie very interesting. So I'm glad you recommended it, Dan, because it was a fun watch.
Well, I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. But you brought up an interesting point. I never really thought about like how the film, like how its color grading was and whatnot. So interesting observation, Miranda. That's something I never really thought about.
Yeah, I was gonna take notes, but I didn't. So I'm sure there's tons of other stuff we could actually like go in more depth to talk about. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, right before you brought it up, that was the next thing I was going to get to, but it is kind of interesting. This movie is kind of interesting visually because, like, for all the points that Miranda just brought up, but it's also interesting. Like, it totally worked for the movie to kind of look like a cheap, like, made-for-TV horror movie because it's kind of riffing off of like bad horror movies, like bad slashers. And it's like, but all like there are times where like it's like, wow, that's pretty impressive. Like they got like really good lighting with like fog machines and stuff like that, like some really cool shots of like the forest and stuff like that. So aside from like the color grading, which like might just be like purposely like made like that just to like give it that like cheap horror movie feel.
2010 aesthetic.
Yeah. So it's just kind of it is kind of an interesting movie like visually because it's like, yeah, it's nothing like too impressive, but when you think about the movie itself, it's like, well, it probably is like on purpose. It's probably like made to look like that, like for part of like the humor, because they're trying to frame it like a horror movie, but it's like Dan put it earlier, it's like it's a horror movie by accident because like it's all a big misunderstanding, and that's what leads to the horror parts. So it's just kind of funny. It just all adds to the joke. So definitely like a fun little element that they did, and I mean, yeah, they did a good job. They captured the feel. So,
like I was saying with Train to Busan, everything like fits together. Everything in this movie also fits together really well. Nothing seems too jarring, and like they're playing on the time period of when it was made, all those other like slasher movies, and all of that jazz, and it just comes together to make a really interesting piece of media.
agreed.
Tucker and Dale versus Evil is a very interesting movie. Would definitely recommend it, but like I said, don't watch the trailers. But let's get into our ratings. Dan, what would you give this movie out of 5?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to go with a 3.5. I really did have a lot of fun with this movie. It's very, very funny, has lots of good laughs. It's just an all around enjoyable film, but it's not anything I think that's going to like wow you per se. But it's there for a good time and it does its job well. So yeah, 3.5.
And Udi, what would you give it?
I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. I think it's one of those movies where it's like visually when you watch it at first glance, it doesn't seem super impressive. It feels kind of cheap and like there's not really any like big name actors aside from Alan Tudyk, who I mean isn't necessarily like a big name actor. He's just been in the business for a long time and in a variety of different projects. But it sets out to do one thing and it does it really well, and it's funny and it's a good time and has some good gags, and yeah, I mean I don't know much else I could ask from it. So yeah, 4 out of 5.
Good score. I am going to give this movie I'm kind of teetering on a 3.5 and a 4. The way my 4s work is different than most people. So, as we know, my rating system is all over the place and none of it makes sense and there's no logic to it. So, I guess I'm going to give it a 3.5 as well. The Atomic Lizard's average score for Tucker and Dale versus Evil is a 3.66 repeating, which would round to a 3.5. Now to our final movie.
And so our third and final movie of the day is called Stay Alive. Stay Alive is a 2006 film directed by William Brent Bell, and the film is about a group of 20-something-year-olds who play a horror-themed video game, but with each action it becomes reality. When you die in the game, you die in real life. So what are your initial thoughts on the movie? Was it kind of what you guys were expecting, or was it a little better, a little worse?
Yeah, interesting. So this is interesting because like I think I had heard of the concept of this movie before because like I had brought it up to you before, where it's like isn't there like a movie out there where if you die in the game you die in real life, and then yeah, I guess it's this movie. I will say starting off, this movie just makes me feel nostalgic because I don't know. I always get nostalgic with movies that are just drenched in the 2000s. And this movie is for sure just dripping with the 2000s. And I don't know, makes me nostalgic because I grew up in the 2000s, you know? So I always get a little nostalgic when when you can tell that a movie was made in the 2000s. That being said, I really didn't know what to expect from this film. I know that Udi had prefaced us before by saying that it was kind of like a cheesy like horror movie. But that being said, it kind of fell a little below average for me, if I'm being honest. I didn't like this as much as the other two movies, but I still had a good time. Like I feel like this would be a good movie to watch with friends, get some drinks, get some pizza, you know? So it was enjoyable at least to watch with you guys. And it had like an interesting premise because I think you guys, Udi, isn't this like the whole like curse or whatever that the game is based off of? Isn't that like a real life person?
Yeah, the like the demon sort of like curse legend, whatever you want to call it, entity that is like the main antagonist in the film is based off of the true story of the 17th century noblewoman known as the Blood Countess.
When you find out what she does to like her victims in this movie, it's pretty messed up. And to like find out that that's based off of a real person, it's like, ooh, like, ooh, that's really creepy. So, I did find that aspect of the movie interesting. In terms of the characters, I found some of the characters to be a little interesting. Like, I enjoyed the Frankie Muniz jump scare. Like, that was pretty funny. So, like,
I love Frankie Muniz jump scare.
yeah. So that was fun, and I liked that one character. He was like the brother to that one chick that I think the main character was he dating her? if I remember
The
correctly.
main character?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was dating October.
Oh, her name was October. That's such a weird name.
And Frankie Muniz' name is Swink.
Swink, yeah. He had like that
Brother's
weird like
name is
nickname.
Phineas, right?
Phineas,
Yeah.
yeah. I kind of, I don't know. I mean, Phineas was kind of an a-hole at times, but I don't know. I kind of liked him. So, like, I enjoyed him, and then I like the whole like group dynamic that they had going, and I don't know, just like I liked that one scene at the beginning of the movie where like they're all getting together to game, and like they even got their boss in on the action. It's like, you know what, that kind of reminds me of like when I get together with like my friends to like game and whatnot. We're all in like, you know, we all meet up or we're all in like different locations and whatnot. So I kind of enjoyed, like I said, this movie made me feel nostalgic. So it had that going for it for me. But other than that, like it was kind of just typical, like what he was saying, it was like cheesy, like horror movie or whatever. But there's stuff to be enjoyed. So it wasn't all bad. But I did enjoy the other two movies a lot more than I did this one, but it was still fun.
It definitely was an interesting watch. As Dan was saying, it is so 2005, 2006. The fashion, the words they say, like, they say some stuff and it makes no sense. And then them all, like, playing video games together with all their TV monitors and everything was really interesting because I just never seen that before. I'm not really into gaming. I play Tetris and that's about it. Oh, and Splatoons. Well, that's about it. So that was like an interesting thing to see back in like 2006, like how group gaming like happened. As for the plot, it's interesting. It definitely has a very interesting premise and like concept, and I think taking that concept and making it into more of a modern day like story or like system with VR or like something of that nature could be really interesting, or they could go and do like a VR thing and like take Blair Witch, like the marketing they did with that movie, but that might cause some issues because of like or unreality stuff and like saying or marking this like this is fake and like the line there. I don't really know how that would actually work in modern day because the internet is not 2005. It's not the 90s or whenever the Blair Witch Project came out. So it'd be really different. But this movie has a really interesting concept. So I was engaged and like paying attention and fully like interested in the story. We did watch the extended edition or like the uncut one. I'm not really sure what the differences are. I mean, you could kind of tell when watching just based on the quality drop or the situations that happen where the like added footage was in. So maybe the theatrical version is slightly different, but I don't think it like took away from the movie that much to have that extra stuff in. But again, only seen the one version, so I'm not really sure what the differences are. But if you want to watch a movie that is from 2006 and like think you are in 2006 with the computer video game graphics to like the dialogue to the fashion choices, the flip phones, the like really chunky Alienware computers and laptops, it's definitely a time capsule. And the guy in the beginning, Loomis, I think, I was watching the movie and I was like, I know that guy. Why do I know that guy? He's familiar. Turns out he plays a character on Gilmore Girls, Jesse, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's where I know him from. So that kind of was in the back of my mind the entire time. And like the plot and the kills are interesting. They definitely tried to do like spooky stuff with like background shadows and everything. But like at the same time, it's kind of hard to take it seriously because it is like from 2006 and it was kind of crunchy in quality, but like that's no fault of the DVD or the TV or any of that stuff. That's just how movies age. They age. It happens.
Admittedly, it is probably the DVD that is why it was more crunchy. Because apparently, like, I don't think it's available in. Well, it's definitely not available in 4K, but you can get like an HD version of it. Like, I think on like streaming services like Vudu/Fandango at home and stuff like that. Although I don't think you can get the unrated cut like that. At least not on like an online store. So. But the DVD, I mean, can be a little crunchy, especially like you said during the unrated extended cut parts.
Yeah. Although, even though it is crunchy, I think it adds to the effect of the movie. I think it like
Oh
actually adds a
yeah,
bit of charm and like the movie benefits from it because if it was in HD, I feel like it would just feel extra bizarre and out of place. So it, to me at least, works with what the movie is.
totally, for sure. And I guess that being said, I mean, this was my pick. I had kind of settled on this a while back, and I mean, I kind of reconsidered it after I saw what Dan and Miranda were picking because I was like, oh man, those are some great movies. I was like, man, I don't know, maybe I should change, but I'm glad I stuck with it. I'd been wanting you guys to watch this movie for a while, mainly because one, I knew it was a horror movie you guys would be able to handle, but also two, just because like I'm not gonna lie, this is sort of like a guilty pleasure of mine. I watched this like recently, like after it came out around like 2006, 2007. It was during this one vacation that I had, and it was just like a special environment with like the people I was watching it with, and it just kind of forever ingrained this appreciation and love for this movie, even though it is like, I mean, I can even admit it's not the greatest movie ever. It's not the greatest horror movie ever. It's not really very scary, but I just feel like there is just, aside from like just the overall, I mean, now like the nostalgic charm of just being very 2000s-y, which I mean I have a very deep well of nostalgia for because it's like that's when I was growing up, really. So aside from just that, like it is just charming in a way. And I mean, like, yeah, you get some things where it's like some of the dialogue is like, ugh, like hasn't aged that well. Some of the words and phrases that they use, unfortunately, are products of their time. But for the most part, though, like it gets me on two ends. It gets me like it's a horror movie, and it also gets me in like it's a video game themed horror movie. So it's like all the lingo, the gamer phrases and stuff that they're like throwing out there. It's like, ha, I remember like that stuff growing up. And while like I wasn't old enough to really be gaming online at the time, and I didn't like I still was aware of all of that. So like hearing it now, like I can watch that movie and like pretty much understand or figure out like how it is that they're doing everything they're doing. Obviously, some video game aspects are just like typical movie stuff, like that's not possible, whatever. But that being said, I honestly feel like it's one of the better movies, all things considered, of like portraying like the environment of like playing video games with like friends. Like obviously you still get some like cringy things. Like people would never say that. Even like in that time, I don't think people would probably say that like playing with their friends or whatever, but it still felt pretty like authentic and genuine to the experience overall of like playing a game like multiplayer with your friends and stuff like that. So I appreciate that. And then like all, even though I never really got to do it to the extent that like people like playing Halo 2 back in the day did, like a LAN party, like the idea of it and like seeing it in an old footage and stuff is like, man, that would have been so freaking cool to do like a LAN party back in the day.
I 100% agree. You are right. This movie is very good at like being authentic with how it is getting together with a group of friends and playing a video game together. Because, like I said in my thoughts, like it really did remind me of when I would do that, back way back when.
Yeah, and then like I'll give him props too, like even though it was probably like a good, I guess, like marketing deal or whatever, but like they were able to get like Alienware computers for all like the cast. Well, in the movie at least. I don't know if they got to keep them afterwards, probably not. But like that was kind of like like they got some Alienware gaming computers, like cool. And like stuff like that. So I don't know, like just overall, like I said again, it's not the greatest horror film ever. It's pretty cheesy. I can totally understand people not thinking much of it, and maybe it was just like it was the perfect time and space that I watched it in that like it'll forever hold like a special place in my heart. But I just think the premise overall is very interesting, and like Miranda and Dan and I were kind of talking about this after watching it. But I mean, yeah, kind of like how Miranda brought up, and like this is what she brought up in her idea. But yeah, like a VR version of this would be really cool. Like it's been like my dream for the longest time to like make a modern day version of this. So I just think it'd be really cool to try to modernize it because, like, yeah, I mean, VR would probably make the most sense. Like, you could do other stuff, but I think VR would just make the most sense. And I don't know, it wouldn't have to be like a direct sequel to this or anything, but just like the idea of like dying in a game and then dying in real life, and then I don't know, like it is just cheesy, and I think some people will just never really connect with it and will just think it's dumb, which fair enough, I guess. But like for me, it really works. I just think it's a fun idea, and I think it could lead to some really fun moments and scenes and sequences. So like I just really love this premise, and there's a lot of stuff going against this film. Like, I mean, it even for 2006, like it looks a little cheap at times. It's not. It's for like a PG-13 movie primarily, so even in the unrated like extended cut, like they don't really add a ton of like not that it needs it, but like there's not like a ton of gore or blood or like crazy kills or anything like that. It's like pretty tame for a horror movie. And then they just like they add some creepy elements or whatever here and there, but it's really not that scary. But that being said, I think the other element that really helps this film is all the stuff like the Blood Countess, Elizabeth Bathory, like all of that like legend stuff. She's kind of similar to like Vlad the Impaler, but so like that just adds like a whole new element to it. And as far as I know, I don't think there's any other movie, or at least not that I'm aware of. There might be actually that includes her story. So like I don't think I'd ever heard of Elizabeth Bathory slash the Blood Countess until watching this. It does kind of add a little bit of something. Like I'm not gonna give it too much credit in like the true story stuff, but it does just kind of make it a little bit more interesting and kind of in a weird way grounds it a little bit. I don't mean that like super seriously, but it just makes it seem more interesting, I guess. So out to the first half is kind of a bit more like, okay, this is kind of like whatever. But then I think when they start leaning more into like the legend of like Elizabeth Bathory and everything like that, I feel like it does get a little bit more interesting. It's like, oh, okay, like there's a potential way to like get out of this curse and like to fix this and blah blah blah. And then yeah, and I mean, I think overall, like there's probably no game that would probably look like how the game looks in the movie at that time, but I do feel like they did a good job of capturing somewhat of the feel of graphics of that time. And even like I said, even if the game was a bit more advanced than like probably a game like that would be at that period, it still like feels like an accurate game for like 2006 ish. And especially kind of like a survival horror co-op game like that. I just think they did an interesting job doing all of that. I just for, I guess, because Miranda brought this up, I would only really recommend watching the unrated extended cut. I haven't watched the theatrical cut since I think I like watched it back in 2006, 2007. It's been a long time since I watched that version, but I mean, just from what I know, there's just really no point really. I mean, if that's the only way you can watch it, then obviously go ahead if you're interested. But I would highly recommend the unrated extended cut because it adds like 20 minutes of footage, but it's like kind of important footage. Like there's this whole side plot where they investigate like the developer of the game because it's like an underground slash like indie game kind of. So it's like it's not a big publisher. Like they got to figure out who the dev team is, and it's just like one guy. So they like seek out this one guy and to try to find out more about the game. And like that's not in the movie at all. So like in the theatrical cut, I mean. So it's like without that information, it's like, okay, how would they know? Like in my brain, because I don't remember, I'm like, how would they know what to do, where to go? Like that doesn't make any sense. And then they have like this other part where he's like, oh, go check out this local author who like wrote a book about all this and is like an expert. And they go talk to her after they like meet the dev, and then like that part is important too. Like they have some pretty important stuff there. So then like again, I don't understand how you could watch the movie and understand it without those parts. So definitely would recommend just for like that alone. And I mean, they do add a little bit of gore and a few more jump scares throughout. So yeah, I would look into it, whatever means you need to watch the unrated special cut. And I mean, I haven't watched it in HD. I don't think I've ever watched it in HD. I've only ever watched it at this level of quality. So I'm very intrigued to see what it would look like. But I looked up a couple of video essays on YouTube after we watched it, just out of curiosity, like to see what people are saying about this movie. And, if there's any potentially kind of interesting video essays, more so like talking about Elizabeth Bathory. There wasn't like that much stuff about it, but there was one that was like using clips from the HD version. I'm like, wow, that looks way better. So I was like, maybe I'll invest in buying an HD copy of it someday. Unfortunately, never released on Blu-ray. Otherwise, I would own the Blu-ray. But that's a whole other point.
That's interesting that some of this movie is based on like real life situations or a real life person. I think you said that it kind of like grounds the film, and I think that definitely helps because it is very out of this world, not like normal-ish type of story, I guess. There's probably a better way to describe it, but it does add a bit to it. So it doesn't really feel all out of place Because if they like made up a like villain for this, I don't know if it would land the same, I guess, because like they have to do so many steps and go to this house and then they have to find this tower and like all that is like, well, if it's already like a semi-real world situation that like happened, then of course those things are in the real world. Whereas like if they're making it all up, it'd be kind of like wow, this is a weird coincidence type thing. So like you said, kind of like grounds it a bit more.
Heavily agree with you, Miranda. I think it was the right choice to kind of like base the antagonist off of a real person, because if they just would have went in and made like their own like creepy like demon killer or whatever, I don't think the concept would have worked as well. I mean, it still would have worked, but the fact that they based it off of like a real person, I think definitely helped it.
And yeah, going back to like some of the aesthetic things of like the 2000s, I just wanted to add that the DVD for this is like peak 2000s DVD. Like I love the main menu. Like you can, it's like, it looks like the video game is like create your own character and stuff like that. And I really miss that sort of thing in old movies. So that's really fun. I love that.
So cool to see. Just to be like, here's your DVD menu. It's interactive. You can kind of make a character. It's fun. Like, I miss that stuff. That stuff needs to come back because it's just fun where you can like click around on a menu screen and like now they're all like boring. It's like, here's a picture that kind of moves a little bit. But I do like the DVD like loading screen menu for this movie. It's very cool.
I said it once when we were watching it, and I will say it again for the podcast. That was back when DVD menus actually had character. DVD menus used to be kind of creative back in the day. And then, do you guys remember when DVD menus actually had to have, like, they actually had games? Granted, they were pretty much to the extent of, like, point-and-click games or, like, memorization games, but still, it was cool. It was cool little stuff to do.
It was cool. Like, Shrek 2, you could do Far, Far Away Idol or whatever. Like, just give me an interactive thing so I can play around before I watch my movie. Like, it's so cool.
I agree. DVD menus, or I guess Blu-ray menus or whatever, are just so boring nowadays because it's like you guys are saying, it's like they just stick a JPEG on there and it's like, all right, there you go. Or they just like put in very low frame rate clips from the movie. Bring cool DVD menus back, dang it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Even as like a huge collector, like 4K, as just time has gone on, like the movies have gotten worse in terms of like presentation on like the physical media. So like DVDs were like peak. I don't think I've ever seen a Blu-ray that really had that unique of a menu. Like I'm sure there are some, but for the most part, they just kind of have like a very clean, slick presentation. And then 4K Blu-rays are just literally the worst in terms of like main menu presentation. Like you guys have been saying, it's literally just like a JPEG most of the time, and then just like you scroll across the JPEG to like hit whatever button, because sometimes they put them in weird patterns to make it seem interesting. I don't know, but yeah, DVD menus used to be like the best. And like to the point you were making, Dan, like not only did some DVDs I guess like have like little games on them, but sometimes they had like demos for like actual like console games on them. Like I'm pretty sure the Ang Lee Hulk movie I think had a demo for the game that if you put it into like I think an Xbox console, or I'm assuming it was one of the two consoles, but I'm gonna go with Xbox, it actually lets you play a demo of the game off of it. Or I want to say, maybe not, I could be wrong, I want to say the Spider-Man, Sam Raimi Spider-Man had like a demo of it on it, but maybe not. Maybe that was just like a trailer for it. But yeah, like sometimes they'd have stuff like that. And they had like lots of like cool features though, for sure. Like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man one not only had like a cool presentation on like the main menu, but it had like a whole like bonus feature thing where it had like the rogues gallery of Spider-Man. You could like click through all this different stuff and blah 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 blah. Getting a little off topic, but like yeah, very very much miss when physical media had cool features like that.
And one last thing I want to say while we're on this note is I also liked it when, because back when we had those menus, when you would play the movie, they would like play a little clip from the movie to like, I guess, kind of tie in with you actually watching the movie. Like The Dark Knight, for example, whenever you would click play on The Dark Knight, a short clip of the Joker from the movie going, and here
we go.
Yeah, exactly. And then the movie would play, or and I think like the Grinch DVD would do the same thing where like it would play a quick clip from the movie to like signify that the movie was about to begin or whatever. Like I miss that stuff too. Like I'm telling you, man, just bring all that back. We love it.
I think the like menu screen and the interactiveness of it for this film and the other films just help tie into the movie. And like, of course, there is a nostalgia factor for us in this, but to present something creatively just helps like elevate a film. Because like now you just go onto Netflix and you just click play, and that's not fun. Like we need more fun and more physical media. They need to stop like deleting things offline and give us proper versions of media so we can collect them and watch them and share them with people. But another thing when you put this DVD in and it started was like coming soon to video and VHS or DVD or whatever, those like things where they like play the little previews is also like a nostalgia thing. So like I think Dan, you were mentioning that this brings like nostalgia, and like Udi, you were talking about like the first time you like watched it and everything, and it's like, yeah, I wasn't into the gaming and stuff, but like I can see and like get that like feel of that time period in this. And it's like a little time capsule, and it's really neat because I've watched a lot of movies from a lot of different decades, but not really anything that was like not a cartoon from the early 2000s. So it was just an interesting and fun ride to see like what is a video game horror movie like in 2006. So is it necessarily the greatest movie? No, but if you got like an hour and a half, I definitely say give it a watch because it was really interesting.
Wouldn't steal a car, would you?
Oh, not that ad.
Oh yeah, that ad's on there.
The ad that stole the music to use, and that's just, you can't get any more ironic than that. An anti-piracy ad that pirated its own music.
Yeah, it's so strange.
Yeah. That ad is like peak nostalgia. Same with the coming soon to home video or whatever.
Oh yeah, or coming soon to theaters. Like, oh, brings back memories. Oh, and to respond to that ad, if I could download a car, yes, I would download one. Just saying.
Heck yeah.
I feel like you could do that in like Fast and Furious or something.
I wouldn't even be surprised if at some point we get to the point in Fast and Furious movies where like, oh, just download this 3D model of this car and then you can print it.
Yeah, maybe one day.
But we'll get there when we get there. One other little detail I wanted to bring up before I forget that I kind of appreciate, like it's silly, but I appreciate it, is like in horror movies, sometimes they'll have like a little like audio cue of like, oh, the spooky thing is going to come up soon. Like, watch out. That was like a thing in like the Paranormal Activity movies, like pretty famously. Sure, it's happened in lots of other movies, but those are like the first ones that came to mind. But in this one, the audio cue that you get is the sound of like a controller rumbling on like a surface. So there's like a scene like in particular after like the boss character was killed. Well, it was the night that he got killed, and also like the day after, where he hears it, which is like one is like kind of funny because like usually I don't think the characters in the movie can actually hear the audio cue for the scare coming up, but in this one, like I think just at times they could, or maybe they always could, I don't know. But in particular, in this one part, like the boss character was like trying to leave his office, and then he like hears this vibrating in his office. So then he like goes back in, opens the door, and then like he's like, "Oh, I dropped my controller on my desk. Ha ha ha! Silly me." Even though like everything is turned off, so he should probably be more worried that his controller is just on and vibrating by itself with no power. But whatever. And he like grabs it and is like, "Oh, phew, haha, I'm okay." And then he dies. And then like the next day, the main character goes and investigates the office, and then he also hears buzzing, goes to the exact same spot, and then finds his phone, like the boss's phone. So I just thought it was like funny that that was like the scary audio cue was like a controller rumbling, but it tied into like the movie, like the gamer aspect. So I just thought it was like a fun little detail.
I mean, yeah, that makes sense to have like the audio cue to be the like rumbling of the controller. I think it was a good choice, like artistic choice for them to do it that way, because I don't think any other audio cues would have been as effective.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they could have done like the sound of like shears because that was like a thing that Elizabeth Bathory used. But I mean, I agree. I just feel like it tied in like in a fun way with the audio design that like not everyone will pick up on right away, but like for the people that do, it's like it's kind of funny. But I
Yeah.
still like I just appreciate like the idea behind it, I guess.
Yeah. This is a good idea. And then one thing I wanted to mention real quick is like the save feature or like the roses and how like they can use that to like move past the ghost or whatever if they are stuck. And the fact that like Frankie Muniz literally falls into a rose bush and like is saved. But I also liked that the blonde girl with the really chunky old school camera was able to kind of like pick the flowers petals off and like extend and like use that as like a saving mechanism as the main guy like fights the witch lady. I thought that was really like clever too because they ran out of roses and they didn't know what to do and all this stuff. Whereas like, yeah, we're just gonna use this mechanism and extend the time a bit so like she can stay safe and not die as quickly. So there are like little clever things throughout this movie, which is really interesting. I keep saying that, but I do find all this stuff interesting. Like that I'm saying it genuinely.
No, yeah, that's fair. I'm glad you found it interesting because I mean, yeah, like I know it's not the greatest movie ever, and I know we've said that a lot throughout, but it is just like a fun movie, and like I said, I figured it would be like a good one to show you guys, because both of you in different ways appreciate like not great movies, so like I think Elaine's probably not funny enough for Dan's like bad movie taste, but they seemingly did care enough to like add in some interesting elements. So like I feel like that kind of appeals a bit more to you, Miranda. And then for me, I can't just be objective with this movie. Like I just will always love it. Like I can understand. I can be objective enough to be like, yeah, it's not a great movie, but I mean, for me, like I really like it. But I also wanted to add the very important detail in the movie of there's a scene where the main character is washing dishes, but if you really pay attention, he's just washing red Solo cups. Just figured I really needed to add that detail into the discussion because we had a very lengthy discussion about it while we were watching.
It's a great detail. Like just buy new cups or buy real cups. Like you don't have to wash your Solo cups. Like cups are not that expensive. They're like $1 at the thrift store. Like you can buy dollar cups from Walmart. Why are you washing your Solo cups?
I was thinking the same thing because at first I thought he was like a college kid. So I was like, oh, well, that makes sense, because unless you're willing to work like a part-time job while you're going to school, most college kids are broke. But no, this dude had like a full-time job. So it's like, what's going on?
Like suit and tie, like full-time job.
Yeah, like what's going on here, man? Are you really just that lazy? You don't want to do dishes? I mean, maybe he didn't have a dishwasher and well, no, he was washing the cups though. So like, yeah, what the,
Yeah,
what
by
the heck? I don't know.
He just spends all of his money on PC gaming, PC Master Race and all that.
He just spends all of his money on video games, and yeah, he doesn't have any money left over for anything. Well, because he would like order takeout a lot, I think, as well. So I think I'd made a comment during the movie one time where it's like, well, he spends all of his money on video games and takeout, so he doesn't have anything else.
Yeah. And the reason we theorize, or like Dan theorized, and like we were all talking about that too, is because I forgot the main character has a fear of fire, which, as a side tangent, do you get flashes of like his like supposed memories of this fire that he went through when he was a kid, where his dad like kind of went crazy and then tried to kill him and his mom by burning their house down. But there's always like a flash of like a burning N64 controller that I don't know why. I just find hilarious. Like they had to sneak in one more gamer thing in like his traumatic past, and then there's like a flash of a burning N64 controller, and I'm sorry, but it's just hilarious. But
It's ridiculous. And the amount of times that they are like, here's a flashback of his tragic backstory is like way too many times.
So do you think he's afraid of the Nintendo 64 now as well?
Definitely.
maybe. Imagine gifting him a flame decaled version of the N64, man.
Oh no.
He would hate
That'd
you.
be not a
He
good
would not
present.
enjoy Lethal Lava Land in Mario 64, that's for sure.
He would be the king of doing it because he would just avoid the lava.
You know what? Yeah, you're right.
Different than fire, to be fair.
That's fair. But we were like made this theory where he can't cook because he's afraid of fire. So he probably spent all of his money on takeout, which is very expensive, and so that's why he has to wash his red Solo cups, because he actually can't afford anything since he buys takeout every day.
Definitely. It's canon now. It's no longer a theory, it is canon.
But is it a game theory or a film theory? Because this is a movie about games and
Yes.
It's both.
it's both. A film game theory.
Yes. Definitely.
But yeah, that's I just wanted to add that because I kind of forgot, and I was like, oh wait, we have to address this one very important part of the movie.
Yes, we have to. Oh, another detail, I guess. When they go to like the cop goes to the like GameStop or whatever, the game shop, I'm pretty sure I said it's like, wow, this looks so sad. Like it just looked so depressing in there. And I don't know if that's just because that's what game stores look like or if it was the time period or the movie, but I was just like, wow, this is kind of sad.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was supposed to. Well, I mean, I think GameStop has just had like a bad rep for a long time, which I mean, on one hand, fair, but on the other hand, like depending on what you're doing there and what you're looking for, like they're not that bad. They've been like okay for a while, but like some of their practices are kind of crappy. But aside from that, you also reminded me of something else. The one thing aside from the main character group, which I mean, Jimmy Simpson's character Phineas, like he kind of falls into this, what I'm going to get into, but I do think it's kind of funny. Like this is very much a product of its time in a lot of ways, but in one way in particular is that even though this is like a horror film, like where it's like based around video games, every time there's like a hardcore gamer nerd, they're like a weird freak. And so like Phineas is like really like over the top and like neurotic and just whatever. But then like the GameStop employee that's in the movie is just portrayed as like this weird little freak, and it's like, why? Like, why aren't they just regular people? Why are they like all jittery and weird? And I don't get it. It's very much like a 2000s thing though.
I just think that has to do with the environment at the time, because like gaming has like a weird like tumultuous history, because at first it was just seen as kind of like a fad, but then the market crashed, but then it came back in the 80s, and then it was seen as like a toys for like children, and then in the 90s that's when they started to like market it more towards teenagers, and then in the early 2000s, like yeah, it's just gaming was just seen as like a weird little hobby that like, you know, weirdos are into and whatnot. It's kind of just, I feel at least it's just like the boomer kind of like outlook on how gamers are, you know, like you're just being, oh, these weird little kids and their weird little computer games, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree. And like I just think overall it is kind of interesting because I mean, yeah, like I don't know if this had something to do with it, but I feel like pretty much up until around like it was probably just like correlation, but I feel like around the time that like the MCU started to become popular, I just feel like overall nerd culture just became more like cool, more like widely accepted.
The MCU is what made being a nerd mainstream.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. It became like cool to like the Marvel movies. So then people are like, ah, yes, I love superheroes and nerd stuff.
Yeah, it became mainstream to like superheroes, because before, yeah, liking superheroes was just a kind of a nerdy like thing, but then the MCU came out, gained mass appeal, and now all of a sudden it's cool to like superheroes.
Yeah. And so I definitely feel like around this time or that time, like things change. And so like now, I mean, people don't really care. Like if you play video games, like a lot of people are like, oh, that's cool. Like, what do you play? Or like they're like, oh, that's cool, you know, whatever. Whereas like back in the day, they'd be like, really, you play video games? What are you, it's like 7 or something? So it is definitely kind of interesting to like see this at that time, because like even though it's a movie about like gaming or like relevant to gaming, like the hardcore nerds are still like weird little freaks.
Video games also gained popularity because of like YouTube and streaming and like tutorial videos and all that jazz. is so prevalent in today's like pop culture society that like anyone can play video games now, not just like the weirdos. And like it kind of sucks that like people back in the day thought like video gamers were like weirdos, but there's like that stereotype of like, oh, it's a 30-something-year-old guy who lives in his mom's basement who just plays video games all the time, which like is not a great stereotype, but like they're called stereotypes for a reason. The culture around video games have definitely shifted from 2006.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And once again, just the last thing I want to say on this subject is it also just didn't help that video games for the longest time was seen as something that was mainly for children. Because if like you're like a adult and you're playing video games, especially like way back then, people looked down on you and were like, oh, like grow up. Like, what are you doing playing video games? You should grow up or whatever. Because once again, like in the 80s, because the video game market crashed, Nintendo, when they released the NES in the 80s, they had to market it as a toy for children because that was, at least here in America, they had to market it as a toy for children here in America because nobody was willing to take on selling video games again after the market crashed. So that's kind of what I think led into that mindset that video games are for children. And there's still people even to this day, even though gaming is enjoyed more and more by adults, there are still people to this day that just view it as children's stuff. So unfortunately, I don't think there's ever, I think that's just always going to be associated with video games, unfortunately.
Yeah, probably. But, and just to address this, just because like I do want to give this other perspective. I mean, I say like, oh, you know, the gamer like nerds are portrayed as like weird little freaks in this. Like, to be fair, there is like a, whether it be like a small but loud or like I don't know what percentage of the gamer fan base would be, but like, yeah, I mean, there's definitely like a side of the gaming fan base that is not great. It doesn't help that for like the longest time, and I mean, still definitely like nowadays it's still like male dominated, unfortunately. And I mean, a big part of that is because of the loud, annoying gamers who like give gaming a bad name, like make it unenjoyable for women to try to get into gaming and just make it miserable for them. So, I mean, just to address that, like, because I mean, it's like as someone like me, it's like I mean, I'm I'm just a regular guy, so like seeing gaming and whatever portrayed in like a weird like oh he's a gamer, he must be like weird for you. Like it's just like it's silly, but it's also well, I mean, like okay, fair. Like there are definitely people who give it like a bad name. So I guess yeah, just to address that.
Yeah. I also just want to say, while it may seem like gaming is mainly male dominated, I'm pretty sure there was a study where like either more than half or about half of gamers were actually female. But I think they were taking into account like mobile gaming as well, like app, like Candy Crush, all that crap. So
Gotcha. Well, hey, I mean that still counts. But yeah, I mean, if you guys don't have anything else to add, then we should probably just get on to ranking. So yeah, Dan, let's start with you. How would you rank Stay Alive?
So I think I'm going to go with a 2.5. I think it's a pretty average movie. It does fill me with nostalgia, and it was fun to watch with you guys, but I really didn't find much to it, to be completely honest. Like, if I'm going to sit down and watch a enjoyably bad movie, this probably wouldn't be at the top of my list, but I still had fun watching it with you guys, and it had some interesting ideas, so it wasn't all bad. So yeah, I'm going to go with the 2.5.
Fair enough. Fair enough. For me, I mean, even though this is my pick, and like I said, I just really truly do have like a true appreciation for it, which is probably very nostalgia fueled, but I just love it in its own way. I'm still gonna give it a 3. I mean, is it potentially worse? Probably. I mean, it really depends on how you feel about certain things, but like for me, again, like it makes me nostalgic. I watched it like the perfect time for me to like really get a true appreciation for it. It's very 2000s-y, so like not only is it nostalgic in the sense like I watched it growing up, but like it reminds me of that period of time. It's like video game themed, like the premise I really like. I really would like for more horror movies to give it a shot. And I mean, yeah, like I like the whole Elizabeth Bathory blood countess thing. Like that really does add a little bit of intrigue to me. So like all that, and so I'm gonna give it a 3. What about you, Miranda?
Again, I'm kind of in the between of 2.5 and 3. There's definitely aspects of this movie that I like, but at the same time, it's not quite as bad where it's like bad but good, but it's like also not quite as good as like it could have been. So it's like in this weird in between. So I guess a 3. Yeah, we'll go with a 3.
A solid 3. So then that means that the Atomic Lizard score is a 2.83, which clears to be a 3. Woo!
That was our conversation on Train to Busan, Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, and Stay Alive. Give them a watch if you're in the mood for a spooky movie during spooky season. Thank you so much for joining us and listening to our conversation about these spooky films. If you're interested in hearing more, check out our previous episodes. And as always, you can find us on Instagram at Atomic Lizard Pod and on Letterboxd at Atomic_Lizards.
Happy Halloween, everyone.